Well, hey there. Welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter reading of Shattered Dreams Restored. Go ahead and do me a favor and hit that like button as always, as it helps me get in the algorithm. And I'm not saying it, I mean it. It really does help me get in the YouTube algorithm. This chapter is entitled Eternity. We were blessed every day by visits from several of my children and dozens of my grandchildren. Hector seemed so happy whenever anyone arrived to see him. He always had his bag of Skittles ready to place 3 or 4 colored candies into the small hands of the expectant children. He loved to see their faces light up with delight for 3 Skittles. Sorry, I'm just saying. I'm not a big Skittles person, but 3 Skittles, is it equivalent to even 1 Starburst? It's like, really? Then I gotta remember where they live. This is Hector passing out Skittles at the fair in Colonia LeBaron. Y'all see him? All right. I was just like, 3 or 4 Skittles. That's really not a lot of Skittles, but okay. Only 2 or 3 times did I ask visitors to leave, even though Hector insisted he was not too tired. I knew differently. I could see the pain in his eyes as his heart raced frantically while he placed his hand over his erratic pounding chest. During the first month, Hector was bedridden. He allowed me to let our older grandchildren sit with him while I took a quick trip to the store or had my makeup applied. But after a frightening coughing spasm, he pled for me to never leave him alone with a grandchild ever again. I don't want to pass away while they are here and frighten them. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. I don't feel it wise to put them in that situation. Such was Hector's concern for others above himself. Seth made it a ritual each morning to drop by and watch Fox News with Hector. He offered on several occasions to tend to him, especially the 3 times a week when I'd drive a mile to a small restaurant to buy his favorite beef and vegetable soup. Seth's 11 children lived next door. The older 5 took turns each day on my computer, but only after they helped themselves to their bread. Grandpa loved holding their hands upon their arrival. Tell me a story, he challenged each one. 22-year-old Seth Jr. knew that in just 2 days, Hector and I would celebrate our silver anniversary. He held Grandpa's hand, lovingly questioning him. Shall we have a cookout? We can buy some thick steaks and invite the family if you feel up to it. Thanks, but all Grandma and I need for our anniversary is each other. I don't feel like eating during that much commotion. Besides, it's far too cold outside. When we were alone, Hector called me to his side. He reached out, taking my hand and kissed it. I don't think I'll make it until the 23rd, Irene. You don't have to stick around until my birthday on February 1st, but I do want a silver anniversary. I'll try. Wow, y'all. It's something about it for some people. I just feel like you're told, like you're given signs or dreams or whatever that your time is gonna come. Ugh. Whew. He checked the tube to make sure the oxygen was still flowing. I really don't think I can endure that long. He removed the small blanket from his knees. Will you help me to go into the bathroom? I pulled his frail frame from the sofa into an upright position. His legs wobbled as he held tightly onto my hands so he could gain his balance. We both took small steps cautiously down the side of the kitchen table. I held his oxygen hose so it wouldn't tangle. Slowly, we edged along the table where he leaned his body into it in passing, hoping to rest. I worried about his balance as he teetered, hoping he would make it another 6 feet to the bathroom door. He was thankful for the new crocheted slippers he received for his birthday on September 29th. He kept them on night and day for warmth. He shuffled along, doubling his grip on me as we headed for the doorframe, where he hoped to cling momentarily to catch his breath. To my utter shock, his slippers shot forward on the tile, and we both fell hard onto the kitchen floor. I braced Hector's fall with every ounce of strength I could muster. I knew he was capable of breaking his bones, so I held onto him for dear life and took the brunt of the fall. We were both crying because of the pain shooting through our bodies, yet I laughed as I pulled my arm from beneath him. If only our kids could see us now, they'd wonder what we were doing on the kitchen floor. They'd think we were having hanky-panky. But if we get caught, just tell them you fell for me. Oh, Irene. Hector and I painfully returned to his resting place on the sofa. My pain became excruciating until I was unable to walk. I called for the grandkids next door to wait on us both. I sat in my oversized chair next to Hector, trying to sleep at night so I could be close to him. After 3 painful days of not being able to function, I had my son Stephen drive me to the hospital in Casas Grandes. I was humiliated to be transported through the corridor into the x-ray room. Thankfully, 2 nurses assisted me in undressing and accommodating me onto the table. My x-ray showed no fractures nor broken bones, but my left hip was inflamed to the bone. The long needle the doctor thrust into my hip hurt worse than I'd ever imagined. The cortisone did relieve a bit of my pain almost immediately. Back at home, I rested and took pills to reduce the inflammation and control my pain for 2 weeks. Let me tell y'all something. I don't see, I've never had it done, but I've seen it done. Those cortisone shots, the length of that thing, insane. That little numbing stuff that I see them put on it and spray on it and stuff, it doesn't seem to do much. So the fact that she had to get that in her hip, Hector panicked, expressing his fear that he would need help that I could no longer provide. His greatest concern was that we were separated. I assured him I would not leave his side no matter what. Somehow we would manage with all the family members close by. I tried to conceal my pain, not wanting to worry Hector any further, so I hobbled around at times in utter agony, wanting to cry out as I fed him, gave him water, and helped him to the restroom. Though in continual distress, I carried on because my beloved's condition was far worse than mine. My precious granddaughters took turns sweeping and mopping the kitchen floor, as well as washing the dishes and keeping the laundry under control. I comforted Hector, giving him refuge as my hip healed. I literally forced myself around the kitchen, preparing his coffee, soups, and toast while I suffered quietly. At all costs, I wanted to give him hope and ease his stressful mind. So I never allowed myself to complain or let him see me grimace. I sat on my computer chair near him, holding hands, offering him attention and love. Those bony hands that touched and served me all these years were now arthritic and always cold. I love you, Irene, he whispered, tightening his vein-protruding hand tighter in my own. It seemed I could never get enough sleep, having to get up every night with his coughing bouts. 2 days later, on December 23rd, I celebrated the 25th year anniversary of marrying a love of my own. Hector had made me his one and only favorite wife. Every previous year, he'd given me a beautiful anniversary card and flowers. He was always so excited. I'd hear him get out of bed before 6 o'clock and bring the bouquet of roses from their hiding place and put them on my nightstand. His card with poetic declarations of love was hidden momentarily under his pillow. Then he'd snuggle up close and ask, "Love, are you awake?" He reminded me of a kid that couldn't wait to open his present. In fact, he'd tell me every year that I was the best Christmas present he ever received. Though 89, he never lost the ability to convey the deep love he felt for me, because we were isolated on a ranch in Mexico and he was too ill to ask someone to get a card and flowers. He feebly tore a page from one of my notebooks and wrote, me, I don't know how to say that, Muneca, Munca Linda, and reached over and placed it in front of my computer screen. When I saw it, I broke down and sobbed. Pretty little darling were the first three words of our song, which he sang with so much love and conviction. I loved it because he always sang it in Spanish. It was so romantic. All right, y'all. I can't do it. It's written out here all in Spanish, and I ain't even gonna try. I'll show it to you. For those of you who, oh, it's gonna be backwards. See, it's written all in Spanish. That's not my girl, boy, they, them. I ain't no there's his. I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying, you guys, you all, I can't. So 2 days later, on Christmas, 5 of my children who lived nearby, Andre, Stephen, Brent, Seth, and Connie, arrived with their families throughout the day and brought gifts to both of us: sweaters, slippers, and my favorite Hershey Kisses. We received 2 or 3 boxes of C's, candy, and can of assorted nuts. Even though Hector was sick and didn't have a sweet tooth, I was excited because it gave me a stash to divvy out among my grandkids. Hector was pleased when the family brought him mashed potatoes and his favorite gravy. He was too ill to eat turkey and all the trimmings, but he insisted I join him in our Christmas dinner. While I ate, he shared his snippets of wisdom, always eager to influence the family with righteous principles. How dearly they all loved him. I always tried to retire early to catch up on my sleep, but he convinced me to stay up late on New Year's Eve so we could watch the fireworks on TV, especially the celebrations in Australia and China. He literally lost his breath from the excitement when the fanfare commenced in New York City. The display of fireworks seemed to divert his focus from his own incapacities. Though he was losing his voice, he continued to shout, subdued, joyful exclamations until his cough made it impossible to continue. He clicked the TV control to off. Well, love, I made it to 2013. Let's celebrate. How about a hot cup of coffee? I've been up since 4 a.m. when Seth entered the following morning with a beaming smile. Happy New Year, Hector. How did you like all the fireworks last night? They spoke a few words while Hector flipped through the channels to catch the morning news. Seth noticed the paleness on Hector's face and the dark circles under his eyes. Are you doing okay? Yes, but I'm ready to go to heaven. I hope it will be soon. I wish my life was like the movie The Notebook. Your mom could lie down here beside me and we could both make a journey to heaven together. I love Hector, but no way was I ready to leave this existence quite yet. Seth, ever the comedian he was, bent down as though he was revealing a confidential secret to Hector. I know how to get her to go with you. When you're ready to ascend, just rip her sleep apnea mask from her face while she's sleeping, and she will never know the difference. I love how, despite all of this, that they're still trying to keep humor, because watching someone slowly die is life-changing. And hearing this, it's heavy. So it's nice to see them trying to create their own little moments. We all chuckled. It really hit Hector's funny bone. With that, he overexerted himself, almost choking from laughter. My sons Stephen and Seth crowded around Hector, who was propped in a sitting position on the sofa. In total, there were 15 loved ones offering their love and respect. When they came to see Hector, I never allowed them to squabble over religion. If they had something positive to say or love to give, then they'd be able to express their opinions. Hector was too weak to be burdened with any foolish controversy. As we visited, I injected a quote I heard: God wants spiritual fruits, not religious nuts. Hector coughed at that one, trying to subdue his laughter. He had given my two sons, Stephen and Seth, his biography, which I bound into a pamphlet just the day before. I want you boys to understand why I lived the life I did. I was always a seeker of truth on the quest for spiritual enlightenment. I learned that to gain perfection, we need to overcome hatred, injury, doubt, despair, darkness, and sadness. Love dissolves fear. Hector was not only a teacher, but a doer. We all knew what an exemplary life he had led. None of us ever heard him say a negative word about anyone. This is a lot. This is a lot about a person. The younger children made their own toast, then exited the house to eat outside so we adults could have peace and quiet. Seth asked Hector point blank, "You've lived 89 years now, and all I want to know is, what was your greatest accomplishment?" Without hesitation, he proudly answered, "Marrying your mother." My heart was bursting with pride. What greater compliment could I have received? "Well, that's wonderful," Seth replied. "But if you had any wisdom to leave us, what would it be?" "Definitely. It would be a poem that I memorized years ago." I'm promising y'all I can read. "I suggest all of you learn it as well. Then teach it to your children and your children's children. Hide it in the recesses of your hearts. It's the prayer of St. Francis." It took all of his energy as he painfully gasped and forced himself to recite the poem of Saint Francis of, I don't know how to say that, Assisi. I don't want to butcher that name. "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned." He hesitated a moment, trying to regain his breath, determined to finish before he had another coughing spell. He raised his shaky voice in bravado. "And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life." I walked Stephen out to his Jeep where 3 of his children were waiting for him. "Mom, Hector is on his way out. I can just feel it. Though his mind is sharp, I see his body shutting down." Referring to Hector's words of wisdom, he shook his head impressed. He uses very few words to convey such profound wisdom. She has a picture in here of Hector and her well, actually it's not her. It just says Hector skydiving at the ripe age of 81. Now that's impressive. That is impressive. Hector's childhood friend, Osman Jones, who was 88 years old, had dementia and was bedridden the last year or so of his life. He always told Hector that the two of them were running a race to see who returned to heaven first. He was a father-in-law to my son, Stephen, whose first wife, Nancy, was killed in a tragic wreck. Stephen called to inform us of Osman's death. At the conversation's end, Hector put the cell phone down on the sofa beside him as one large tear slipped from his right eye. "I wish it had been me. I can't hang on any longer." 2 days later, when Seth dropped by to watch the morning news with Hector, I left to get my makeup done. My granddaughter, Jamie, who usually applied my makeup, was in El Paso, so I needed Stephen's 17-year-old daughter, Marla, to put on my pretty face. Just before the turnoff to Stevens, I noticed to the left that Lane's red, beat-up truck was in his son Tommy's yard. As I whizzed past the entrance, I spotted Lane seated in the front seat of his truck, backing out to leave somewhere. A thought ran through my mind. Stop now and tell him goodbye, or you may never get another chance. What? Stop and tell Lane goodbye? I don't like, it's just too much. You already said goodbye when you were crying and doing all that stuff for him when he was supposed to be going to get locked up, but apparently he wasn't locked up but so long. So, okay. I was a little apprehensive seeing him again. At 65, he looked disheveled and very unkempt. Like a chameleon, he changed over the years. I was fortunate to have known him in his youth. Back then, he lit up every party as he harmonized with a few of his siblings. His jovial attitude was contagious. Now his good looks had faded. To my sorrow, it seemed the light in his countenance had extinguished. I wouldn't blame him if he decided to snub me, for I had been the cause of his fall from grace. No, he had been the cause because he was doing things that he shouldn't be doing to children. I decided to take the risk away, so I threw my truck into reverse, making my way into the yard. I pulled along the side of his truck. He was pleasantly surprised to see me. Turning off the motor, he got out of his vehicle and came to the driver's side to say hello. I pushed the button, on my automatic window as the cold January air rushed in. He reached in my open window, taking my hand in his as he spoke. Wow, Irene, what a pleasant surprise. I am so glad that you came by. How are you doing anyway? He laughed apologetically, reluctant to share his health problems with me. I still feel weak. I haven't recovered completely from my operation. I have a bag hooked up to me now. He seemed embarrassed, but my prostrate, I cannot ever say y'all know what I'm trying to say, right? Prostate, yes. Problem is a lot better. Ooh, I struggle. I sympathized with him as I gently pulled my hand away. I wanted him to feel validated. I feel so bad that you had to experience your hospital stay in El Paso alone. I wish I could have been there by your side when you woke up. What? I smiled compassionately as he chuckled and his blue eye flashed. If you'd been there, I'd have thought for sure I died and gone straight to heaven. I felt a twinge of guilt as old warm memories surfaced. I didn't want him to flirt with me, so I reluctantly prepared to leave. Lane knew me well enough to detect my twinge of sadness, so lovingly he reached in again, patting me assuredly on my arm. Thanks for dropping by. He walked about 3 feet away, then turned around as I was slowly pulling out of the yard. As he spoke, I heard his voice crack. He raised the volume, making sure I could hear him above my running motor. No matter what, Irene, remember, I'd never stopped loving you. Satisfied, I drove out of sight. I just didn't see no point in her even like going to see him, stopping by, or even telling us about it. Because as far as Lane is concerned, I got a couple fingers for him. For some reason, that night I had insomnia. This was very unusual for me, but all thoughts of sleep had fled, so I got out of bed, deciding to comfort Hector throughout the cold, windy night. He was so tired and exhausted, weary from just fighting for breath. He was so appreciative that I joined him because he woke up feeling chilled. I immediately turned up the gas heater and waited for the room to get warm again. It gave me an eerie feeling to hear the howling of the wind as it flung tumbleweeds and debris against the wooden door of our house. I always tried to remain upbeat and happy in spite of all the troubles that presented themselves. At 3:30 a.m., I shut down the computer when I realized Hector quit coughing and was resting peacefully and returned to my bed, hoping to get a little shut-eye. Once I relaxed my weary body, I soon fell into a light slumber. A haunting foreboding gripped my soul. I knew not why, but immediately it threw open the floodgates of my heart, causing unexplained tears to gush forth. Making sure Hector couldn't hear, I wept till 5 a.m. I felt burdened with an overwhelming grief that surfaced in my psyche, which I deliberately suppressed a quarter of a century earlier. For 28 years, I had simply existed in polygamy, sharing numerous wives with my husband. No one can begin to comprehend the disillusionment, disappointment, and death of dreams that I endured. 9 nieces and nephews and 1 first cousin committed suicide. Whoa. Whoa. 10 people in her immediate family, nieces, nephews, and a cousin, committed suicide. That's heavy. Almost 30 members. What? Why is there almost 30 members of my family and friends were murdered by the orders of my insane brother-in-law, Ervil. For years, we lived daily with threats of death at his hands. I had also buried my first child, a lovely baby girl, and my beautiful 35-year-old adopted daughter, Sandra, who had succumbed to breast cancer. And I had buried my mother, father, and husband. Are all these deaths of lives and dreams why I am so distraught? Is it the reality of Osmond's death and the dread of losing Hector next? At 5:30, I showered, splashing cold water onto my face, trying to disguise the redness and the swelling in my eyes. I did not want Hector to be burdened with my sadness and concerns. I had to be emotionally strong for him no matter what. That afternoon, my phone rang. My daughter Connie's number lit up. By her voice, I knew something was wrong. What's going on, Connie? Mom, Lane is dead. Oh my goodness. He was killed last night on his way to El Paso. His truck rolled. I was dumbfounded. I can't believe it. Are you positive? Yes, I just received the news that he crashed his truck and died. It's a sure thing, Mom. I'll be right over. I was grief-stricken, yet determined to maintain my composure. I would not allow my loving, honorable husband to see me weep. Hector Lane is dead. He is dead for sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, dear. Just then, Connie entered, sharing with Hector what few details she knew. Lane had a heart attack, then rolled his vehicle. Though in shock, to my own amazement, there were no tears. I felt a surprised calm, knowing I had closure with Lane. Here's the funny thing. I was just fussing, like, why would you go do that? Why'd you yada, yada, go? She needed it. Now, whether or not I agree with it, that's beyond here. She needed it, and it's a good thing for her sake that she got it. I thank God that I'd stopped by to see him one final time. I realized how forgiveness frees one from all the strongholds of those who have abused you, broken your trust and heart, then mutilated your dreams. I did not discuss Lane's passing with Hector. I did not want him to think anyone was more important than him. I wanted him to have the assurance that he would continue to be my main focus. When is Lane's funeral, he asked. Is it tomorrow? Yes, it starts at 10 a.m. It will be held in Casas Grandes. Then I insist you attend. No, I couldn't do that. Please, Irene, I want you to go. I know you love Lane, and I loved Lane. Everyone at one time or another loved him. Okay. He's gone to his maker, and he is continued to be loved. We've all had our problems, but it's in God's hands now. Hector was such a sage. He continued. The Bible says we are all sinners and fallen short of the glory of God. Christ's blood covered everybody's sin, including yours and mine. Let's both be the bigger person by completely forgiving him. We can do that, can't we? God said to forgive even our enemies. You know, he was like a brother to all of us for years. Even if you don't feel like going to the funeral, do it for his children. They all love you. I was thankful I had no one to care for Hector. which gave me a legitimate excuse not to go to the funeral. However, my daughter, Verlana, and her husband, Moise, dropped in to love on Hector. Are you going to Lane's funeral tomorrow, Verlana? No. I've spent all this time and money flying from Alaska. You are my priority, and that is why I'm here. Dad, you're more important to me than anyone or anything. Verlana, will you do me a favor then? Stay with me so your mother can attend. She needs to go. Upon seeing his insistence, Verlana lovingly agreed. Stephen arrived the next morning to take me in his double cab truck. His wife, Shema, her sister Connie, and her mother Betty rode the 35 miles to Casas Grandes with us. Betty and I remained friends throughout the years, even after we both left Lane. She'd given birth to 3 of his children, but in spite of her bitterness, she chose to attend the funeral for the sake of all of Lane's other children. She wanted to assuage the resentments and the searing pain they endured because of disparaging remarks from those who sat in righteous judgment. People use the Bible for justification, quoting the verses which stated, the sins of the fathers will be visited upon the heads of the children, generation after generation, which casts negative connotation on them. It's not really, okay. Estella, Lane's first wife, divorced him almost 30 years before his death. If I remember correctly, I'd only seen her one time, which was at the wedding of my daughter Sandra in Alaska. Though she was always civil to me, I dreaded the thought of seeing her again. Mostly, I did not want to step on her toes or cause her any added pain. I knew she would think this was her private territory. I went on ahead of our small group towards those who were gathering near the entrance of the rented hall where the service would be held. Lane's oldest son, Clark, who hadn't seen him in almost 15 years, was awaiting my arrival. He enveloped me in his arms, and we both shed tears of joy and sadness in seeing each other again. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming. Clark's sister, in her late 40s, hurried to my side when she realized I was present. She embraced me with affirming hugs. Irene, you were nothing but a breath of fresh air in our family. Please come over and say hi to my mother. Anxiously, I follow her, not knowing after all these years what to expect, and definitely not wanting her to make a scene. Her misty, dark Spanish eyes caught sight of me. She approached me with open arms, then held me tightly in her welcoming embrace. We both cried softly. There wasn't a word exchanged between us. All we had in common were the memories of the man we both had loved. I felt dizzy and a wee bit nauseous from the overload of emotions. I regretted that I'd forgotten to eat because of the turmoil. I returned to my seat beside Stephen and his family as I mentally scanned the large congregation, hoping to identify Estella's 10 remaining children. Her son Paul had died a year before in a tragic car accident. When her son Marcos realized I was present, he mentioned for me to go forward and accompany him at the open casket. As I approached, Estella's grieving twin son, Richie, and his brothers, Clark, Tommy, and Marcos, held me in their accepting embrace as we all stared at their father's remains. You'll always be a part of our legacy, Tommy stated with pride. Clark cut in, his voice husky with emotion. You will forever be one of our mothers. Richie reassured me of all his love and respect. Here's what I'm gathering from all of this. The fact that Irene spent, 3 years? Or was it a little more than 3 years? I can't remember how long it was, but it wasn't that long. She spent that, we'll say less than 10 years with this man, and she had this type of effect on these kids. Talks about the type of person that she was and how she was there for them and how she loved them, because these people now are all adults and they're speaking so highly of her. I'll never forget how you always fed us and made us feel valued. He smiled through his tears. I have the childhood memory of going to your house and eating my very first tuna fish sandwich. Soft music indicated that the service was about to commence, so I returned to the vacant folding chair Stephen was saving for me. A niece, Tanya, who had been greeting a friend and loved ones throughout the crowd, was shocked to see I was among the mourners. She burst out crying, totally amazed to see me. I never expected to see you here. Of all people, you're the last person I thought would ever show up. Why? I asked, a little perturbed. Because you're the one who turned him in, then gave him a divorce. He had his problems, but I never did quit loving him. I probably said that too emphatically. However, I still felt her warmth toward me as she moved through the crowd shaking hands. Every child who spoke mentioned Lane's problem and how it had affected them. Though crushed by his immoral actions, they wept freely, vouching for all his good points, his love of family, his service to strangers, his patience, and his never-ending communication with family and friends. I cried when Clark spoke, revealing the pain they'd endured by being rejected in their own society. He was brokenhearted that his younger brother, Paul, who had died a year earlier, was denied a funeral in the church because of his father's actions. Now, that's messed up. That is messed up. But it goes to show you one of the reasons why Irene was so concerned about what would come of her revealing what happened. But it was because of things like that. And the children shouldn't have to pay the price. No one, not even the wives, of what was done. We were born in the LeBaron colony. It always has been our home. Now we're treated like second-class citizens. I am happy that those who loved and really knew our father have come from so far to bid him farewell. Nearly 200 mourners had come to show their respect, which surprised me, especially when bitterness and resentment kept several of Lane's own siblings from attending. After the final hymn, I made my way to the front, and I stood by Lane's open casket. His sons asked if I was going to join them in the procession to the Galena Cemetery. I'm sorry, but I need to hurry back to care for my husband, Hector, who is gravely ill. I peered through the protective glass covering into Lane's ashen face for one more time. With the index finger of my right hand, I lightly tapped twice on the glass as though it was to get his attention. Goodbye, my friend, I whispered. I hope my goodbye would not be additional fodder for gossip. Here I was, a well-known person who at one time had been important as the wife of the president of the Church of the Firstborn. Now I disgraced everyone, including my late husband, by not marrying according to the church's rules, and worse, marrying a sinful man. I felt such a diverse mix of emotions. Never would I minimize what Lane had done. He was a pedophile who lost it all, his wives, children, friends, and his honor. I would never carry any guilt for turning him into the law or even seeing him incarcerated. Good. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that mercy could not rob justice. The Bible says sin will seek you out, and it did. Hector wanted me to help him sit up on the sofa. Only once in the last 10 weeks had he moved from his resting place into his overstuffed chair. He instructed Chayla, the hired girl who came once a week to vacuum the pillows and thoroughly clean his resting place while he sat upright in his chair. Before I helped her finish vacuuming the brown overall throw rug, Hector expressed his inability to sit there another minute due to his chest pain. He begged me to help him return to the sofa where he could lay back down. Chayla and I lifted his weakened, declining frame onto his comfortable spot, propping him up on 3 freshly washed pillows. It was time to take Chayla home, and Hector wanted me to get him some fruit at the store. So I promised that I'd return in 15 minutes or so. Verlin's son, Chad, surprised Hector with a short visit while I was away. When I walked in, he had a huge smile on his face. I placed the bag of groceries on the table and asked, "What are you so happy about?" Hector and I had just had a private conversation. I gave him something to think about. Chad got up from the overstuffed chair and walked a foot or two. Then reaching out, he took Hector's hand in his. "Think about it. Seriously, Hector." I couldn't contain my curiosity. "What's going on, Hector?" Still clinging to Chad's hand, Hector motioned for me to place my hand on both of theirs as though we were making a pact. Hector looked into my eyes and spoke. "Chad is my witness. I will not be cremated. I want to be buried right beside you, my sweet Irene." His decision to change his burial wishes was bittersweet, but I was beyond relieved. The following day, January 20th, my daughter Verlana and her husband, Moise, my son Lothair, and his wife Jenny, along with their 7 kids, arrived a little after 8 in the morning. It was Lothair's 40th birthday. He was under pressure to get back to his trucking business in North Dakota. Jenny was thankful that Lothair had taken time off from work and brought them back to Mexico for her grandfather Osmond's funeral. When they saw Hector's condition, it was evident that none of them would ever see Grandpa Hector ever again. Verlana fell on her knees in front of the couch. She took Hector's feeble hands, holding them in hers, weeping openly. I love you so very much. You have been such a wonderful dad to me, longer than even my own father. I adore you. Seeing her so distraught, expressing her feelings of love, we cried all the harder. Lothair gently touched Hector's emaciated shoulder. Through years, he expressed his love and devotion, knowing Hector was so very close to passing. They all hated to leave so quickly, but knew they must. Hector motioned for Jenny's kids to each help themselves to their 2 allotted color Skittles. He was too weak to pass them out himself. Hector's namesake Josiah, who was 6, prostrated his little body onto Grandpa's bony chest. Lothair snapped several pictures of the 2. Reluctantly, they all left the house weeping. I walked them out to their vehicles to say our goodbyes. Out of earshot, Lothair asked, "Do you think that Hector is on his way out?" Believing he was, yet knowing they all had their own pressing agendas, I insisted they leave immediately. Who really knows when he will go? With torrents of tears, my kids cradled me in their arms, saddened that they were leaving at such a critical time. With wounded hearts questioning whether they would ever see their stepfather again, they tearfully got into their cars and headed for the States. I knew that Hector was just a few breaths away from his flight into eternity. I've been so emotionally taxed trying to remain strong, but I knew that without the Lord's help, I was doomed. I opened the Bible, reading verse after verse of the promises of God. But the Lord's unfailing love surrounds the man who trusts him. Psalms 33:10. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Psalms 37:4. In spite of my impending fear, I began praising God for how he had blessed me mightily. Talk about consolation. My fear subsided immediately. I knew that all things were possible with God because he was holding my hand and that my dear husband would soon be rejoicing in the Savior's outstretched arms. Because of God's indescribable love, I would not only survive, but flourish in his unfailing grace and continual mercy. This assurance was mine because I had become a child of the Most High. Hector was very pale and had not slept since 1 a.m. Although the night continued to, all through the night, I continued to be by his side as he anxiously battled for breath. On their way to school, Connie and her 3 youngest kids made their morning round to check on us. Hector said hi to Connie, then gave Thomas and Jeremy their daily Skittles, while their older sisters, Jamie, got on Facebook. Hector, who was so worn out from being awake all night, nodded off into a deep sleep. Connie followed me into the bedroom where we could talk privately. "Mom, look at Dad. He is going to leave us today. Look at his breathing. He's just fighting to stay alive. The kids shouldn't have gone back to the States yet. I know he'll die before they ever get back to North Dakota. I actually thought that I would never see him this morning." She sighed and continued, "That's why I've offered to spend last night with you. I felt in my heart he was going to pass, and I didn't want you to be alone, but you said no." She had to leave to take her boys to school, but promised she'd be back in less than an hour to spend the rest of the day with me. "I don't want to leave you alone in case something happens." When Hector stirred, he panicked for more air, afraid he was suffocating to death. "Please, Irene, turn up my oxygen." I helped him into an upright position with pillows returning him on the sofa. He never complained. The dear soul did his best to hide his despair, but the fear in his eyes spoke volumes. I grabbed hold of his searching hands. His grip was firm. He never let loose my hand. "I love you, Irene," he wheezed. I kept one hand in his as I caressed his face and forehead with the other. I offered to make him hot coffee or chocolate, trying to convince him to eat his buttered toast, but he refused, saying he was no longer hungry. Knowing how painful it was for him to carry on a conversation, I did most of the talking. Hector, you don't need to struggle to hold on for 11 more days till my birthday. I'm thrilled that we've celebrated our silver anniversary. You have been so good to me. I appreciate how you spoiled me. I just hope that these 25 years with me have been worth it to you. Between his labored breaths, he tightened his hand on mine. I want you to know I have never loved another woman as I have you. And there's pauses even in that. He was really struggling, y'all. I chuckled, questioning that unbelievable statement since his first marriage lasted 15 years and his second for 20. Are you getting Alzheimer's? I joked. That's hard to believe. Well, you better believe it, because it's true. How is that? Because you are the only one who ever really loved me. I turned up the gas heater on the wall because he complained that his feet were getting too cold. I adjusted the pillows and gently helping him get comfortable in a laying down position again. Then, to his satisfaction, I snuggled him in his favorite blanket, tucking his slippered feet beneath it. I patted his thin body reassuringly. You're the best, and I love you. Hector not only refused to eat, but he would not even drink water. I didn't want to believe he was about to give up the ghost. My nurse friend Linda had come the previous day and taken his vital signs. His oxygen count was down to 60%. He's struggling to breathe. She spoke as I followed her out of her car. You say he hasn't urinated for 2 days. That's a sign that the body is shutting down. You better get prepared, kiddo. He's getting closer to the end. Call me anytime, day or night, if you want me to be with you when he passes. As usual, Seth made his daily entrance to share a cup of coffee with me. Turning to Hector, he asked, Are you ready to watch the morning news? He nodded his head in the affirmative, reaching out for Seth to help him sit up again. I watched as he painfully exerted himself. He motioned for Seth to get the remote from the wooden stool beside him. You turn it on, Hector whispered. Sorry, I think I'm losing my voice. Seth could see that he wasn't focusing on the TV. Hector was breathing extra hard, so Seth decided to go to the ranch of my eldest son, Andre, where nearly every morning he and a few of their other buddies drank coffee and shot the breeze before going to work. I'll be back soon. If you need me, just give me a call. I did not want to leave Hector alone while I took a shower, so I just took a clean cloth and took a spit bath. A little after, my mom calls it a squish. A little after, Hector suggested I help him stand up, then assist him to walk into the bathroom. With both hands, he clung to mine. I tried to pull him into the standing position, but his feeble legs trembled. He shook uncontrollably as he lost his balance, then plopped back into his sitting position. It took at least 10 minutes to regain his normal breathing. He checked the flow of oxygen. It's not turned up to do me good. It was turned to the number 3, which was normal, but he impatiently instructed me to turn it up to 4.5. No, it's still not giving me enough oxygen. He pulled the 2 small tubes away from his nose, allowing the air to blow onto his lips and nostrils to make sure it was working correctly. I guess it is working, but I feel like no oxygen is filling my lungs. After 3 unsuccessful attempts to stand, he plopped into the couch, discouraged. That's so, ugh. I cannot hold my weight at all. I'm too weak. I hurriedly called Seth on his phone. I'll be there in 2 minutes, Mom. I'm on my way home now. When Seth saw how exhausted Hector was and incapable of being walked to the bathroom as usual, he gently reached under Hector's arms and hips and carried him into the bathroom. He sat him on the metal folding chair covered with a green towel, which kept the chair warm. Have a rest, Hector, and when you're finished, I'll be back. I need to go to my orchard with a trailer of pecan trees. My 2 hired guys are ready to plant them. If I'm gone too long, call me. I'll be here and carry you back, okay? Seth knew it always took Hector over an hour each time, so he felt he had time to get his worker started. Hector looked worse than ever. I don't even have enough strength to shave. Don't worry, you can go at least one day without doing it. I put a fresh washcloth and towel on the counter by the sink. He usually scooted the chair in front of it while he sat and took his spit bath. For the last month, he could not raise his thin legs over the edge of the tub so he could take a shower. Besides, he wouldn't take the chance of falling. As was the daily ritual, he sat on the chair trying to regain his breath. Though on oxygen, it seemed it took him forever. I waited until he gave me the signal that he was ready for me to help him. I sensed his fear, admitting he was too weak not to only shave but to get washed up by himself. I offered to help him, but he refused. I pulled his white t-shirt over his head so I could help him replace it with a clean one. When it was off, I wanted to cry. He looked like a skeleton. He had wasted away before my very eyes. No wonder he never allowed me to help him change his clothes. His chest was emaciated. His heart raced frantically as he motioned rapidly for me to leave the room while he fought for his breath. I did not want him to get cold. The portable gas heater barely took the chill from the bathroom. I hesitated, feeling it was not wise to leave him until he was fully dressed. Are you ready for me to get you onto the commode? He shook his head frantically, waving his hands impatiently, indicating that he wanted me to leave him immediately. I'd always accompanied him, never leaving his side until after he was dressed and ready to return his bed on the sofa. I kept a constant eye on him because he always needed my help, but the fact that he insisted I leave him alone, I respected his wish. I poured myself a cup of hot coffee, seating myself at the kitchen table, knowing I was only 6 feet away from him and available when he called for me. As I carefully raised the steaming brew to my lips, I heard the shocking thud of the metal chair as it crashed. He hadn't cried out when he fell. I knew in that moment Hector was dead. My legs seemed frozen when I stood up to walk, but I fearfully entered through the open bathroom door. There, in a fetal position, I saw his glassy stare as he lay upon the bathroom floor. Though I knew his spirit had left him, I painfully bent over to feel his pulse. He had none. I was in too much agony from the continual pain in my back and hips from my fall to even try to bend over again. I wanted to place his head in a towel, though I knew he was dead. It was beneath his dignity to have his face on the cold tile floor. Hector was a true gentleman, and he didn't deserve this. I painfully hobbled into the yard, screaming at the top of my voice, hoping that maybe a hired man was available to help me. No one was in sight. Knowing they were in the orchard, I called Seth on his cell, but he didn't answer. It took all my effort to make it back to the house to be by Hector's side. As I dialed again for help, my son Stephen was 40 minutes away on his ranch when I told him Hector was dead. He immediately called Seth, telling him to rush to the house and help me. Andre was on his cattle range, and as usual, his signal would not pick up. I called my daughter Connie, who'd I spoken with 10 minutes earlier. I later learned she was on the phone with her son in Minnesota and didn't take my call. She promised she'd be over within the hour with her daughter Jamie to do my makeup. She felt that I could wait because she had talked to me just a few minutes earlier. Frantically, I called my friend Linda. Still, there was no answer. She left 20 minutes earlier for Casas, and the signal would not pick up on her cell phone either. I stood beside Hector, weeping, uncontrollably upset that I couldn't get anyone to respond and come to my aid. I fervently prayed as I tried to call my son Brent. With merriment, he asked, "How is my precious mother this morning? Come quick. I have a dead husband on the bathroom floor and I can't lift him." As I stood over Hector's body, I sobbed, calling out his name over and over and over and over again while I waited for Brent's arrival. "I love you, Hector. I love you. You don't deserve this. Forgive me for leaving the room and allowing you to die alone." He knew he was dying. That's why he sent her out. He didn't want her to see it. Even in his death, he was still worried about her. In so much despair and feeling terribly alone, I frantically called my sister Charlotte. Though no longer sister wives, she was still my sister. I needed someone to share my grief. No sooner had I hung up with Charlotte when Brent arrived. His son, Robbie, joined him a minute later. The two carried Hector's remains into my room, placing him on our bed, where they laid him out, waiting for the vehicle from the funeral home to arrive. That's when I lost it. My guttural groans of agony startled Brent. Completely surprised by my reaction, he reached for my hands. "It's okay, Mama. It's okay. You know it was his time to go. Everything will be all right," Grandma Robbie promised. "We love you. We're here to help you through this." With that consolation, I surrendered, relaxing in my overstuffed chair. Charlotte arrived moments later, embracing me, demonstrating her love and compassion. I appreciated her empathy because she knew that Hector meant so much to me. I'd known for about 3 months that I would lose my husband in the near future. I thought I was prepared, but believe me, you're never prepared to lose someone you love. Oh, my goodness. Ooh. Sorry. That statement is so true. I'm definitely not releasing this on Christmas. There's no way. There is no way. Fulfilling Hector's prior wish, Brent ordered him a handmade pine casket. His friend Lorenzo did a magnificent job. In just 7 hours, Brent invited me to accompany him to see if I could hurry up the process. I watched as Lorenzo stained the lid for the coffin he just finished making. Moments before our arrival, Lorenzo's sister, Ruth, had just finished attaching the white satin lining on the inside of the wooden casket. Connie helped hold the material while she stapled it in place. The finished work was beautiful, even the large satin pillow ready to lay under Hector's head. When they were completely finished, the three men, Seth, Brent, and Lorenzo, loaded the casket into Brent's truck, where he and Connie took it to the funeral home in San Buenaventura, Buenaventura. I returned home with Seth. In less than an hour, Hector's body was brought back to my house, where the wake would take place. Brent confided in me as he pointed at the casket. "You see that beautiful piece of workmanship? Lorenzo didn't charge us a dime. He gave it to Hector as a going away present. I insisted on paying him, but he said absolutely not. He told me that as long as he could remember from the time he was a small child, Hector always spoiled him with candies." Then Lorenzo choked up, saying, "He always loved the candy man." I was distraught and unable to function or even think clearly. So my children made the calls to as many family members as possible. Hector's 6 children from Eloise and his and Judy's daughter Mandy from Utah were notified. We tried but were unable to contact Aurora, Judy's oldest daughter. My daughters, Donna and Barbara, drove 24 hours from Northern California to Chihuahua, Mexico. My daughter, Verlana, who returned to Alaska just 9 hours before Hector's death, tried in vain to schedule a flight to El Paso. She did procure a ticket, but to her utter shock, her flight was canceled last minute. She called sobbing. "Verlana, get a hold of yourself and calm down. Honey, your goodbye was so heartfelt and sincere. You showed Hector you loved and respected him as a daughter. I know he would be sad if he knew how upset you are. Personally, I would rather tell somebody how deeply I care for them while they were still alive, and you did." So true. I want to go to his funeral so bad, yet I found my twins down and sick with terrible flu when I got back. They were glad to see me. Now the thought of leaving them again, I was just there, really upsets everyone. Take my advice. Stay at home. Comfort your kids. You have already been away too long, so don't fret for another minute. Hector loved you, and I know he would completely understand. So she reluctantly took my advice. Just the night before Hector passed, he shared his final request with me. "I don't want you or anyone else to mourn for me. Be happy." My grandmother said that same thing. She told us a while when she first got diagnosed with Parkinson's that she didn't want us to mourn when her time came. And when I'm telling you that sentiment, I don't care if you say that or not. Like, you can say that, but we're going to mourn. Whew, be happy. Promise you'll celebrate at my funeral. I want no tears, no regrets. Just throw a going away party. Let's all rejoice because I have moved on. And please make the funeral short. I don't need anyone to praise me or waste time expressing their love. Let them give all reverence and glory to God. I don't want any flowers either. Please spend what money you have on Skittles and invite all my friends and loved ones to my going away party. He forced a broad smile, trying to ignore his pain as he continued. Let's really live it up, Irene. Let's make it special for all your numerous grandkids because I never want any of them to fear death. So let them all be a part of the celebration too. They can all participate by scattering their candies on my grave instead. He had asked my son Brent just the night before if he would conduct his funeral. He begged him not to prolong the service as they had Osmond's 5-hour service. His wishes were granted. We had only 6 speakers compared to the countless speakers at every other funeral. One of my married granddaughters, Shauna, who was very dear to her grandpa, arrived from Louisiana with her suitcase full of Skittles. In fact, there were 400 small individual bags which could be distributed among all the children once we arrived at the cemetery, plus 1 large bag of Skittles that I personally ordered. I walked over to the casket in my living room and placed a large, colorful bag of Skittles beneath Hector's folded hands. As he had done here on earth, I wanted him to arrive in paradise with Skittles in his hands, ready to greet and distribute them to all the little children. I just wished the friends and family knew the sincerity of Hector's request. I knew there would be those who raised their eyebrows, critically wondering, where is all the respect? But I took the risk, hoping I wouldn't receive too much criticism from the mourners not adhering to the traditional rules. This was Hector's celebration, and I wanted it to be unique, memorable funeral. Donna, my oldest child, had the honor of giving Hector's eulogy. She dearly loved him. Their bond had grown during the 6 years that we lived with her in California. I was so proud that she presented him in his true light. She honored and respected him, reinforcing his wonderful attributes. She gave him accolades for his declaration to me, telling how he became my editor and organized every story perfectly. He moved up paragraphs and fixed all the corrections for spelling and grammar for which I had no clue. Donna also shared how Hector would delete some of my choice words, but having a mind of my own, I'd immediately replace them. She remembered me saying to him, "You write your own book, then you can make all the changes you want." The great thing about Mom and Hector working together was seeing the love and respect they held for one another. They were bonded as though by glue. They allowed no one or any problem to pull them apart. I honor Hector as my papa, not just for loving my dear mother, but for loving all 13 of us as his own. She looked toward the open casket, then raised her hand with her palm open as though to salute. Her voice cracked with emotion. Papa Hector will love you forever. My oldest granddaughter, Irene, confirmed her love for her grandpa. He always referred to her as my fair lady, a name she required, watching that movie numerous times together with him. Though married with 3 children of her own, he had finally referred to her with that title. Smiling contently, she said, each time he gave me a phone call, his first sentence was, "How's my fair lady?" She recalled all their childhood memories, wanting everyone to know what a loving grandpa they had. Grandpa was so thrilled every time I saw him. He pulled the picture out of his wallet that showed him skydiving on his 81st birthday. He flashed that broad smile. I did this because I wanted to fill my bucket list. He was so full of life. Tears fell as she declared, "He will forever be our candy man." My granddaughter, Shauna, who was his pet, let it rip. She shared all her wonderful childhood memories and experiences. She smiled as she began, "I can tell all these stories now that Grandpa's gone. Every time we had our weekly one-on-one lunch date, when I was only 11, we would both break Grandma's strict rule. I had a tattle on Grandpa the first time he allowed me to drive, only because of my excitement. Grandma blew a cork. She actually threatened to leave him if he ever did such a stupid thing again. She would not sit by and watch her grandkids get killed. So we kept our weekly drives our secret. He continued to allow me to drive on the paved roads in Anchorage. He impressed on my supple mind that it was illegal. Therefore, I must drive with caution. He wasn't as worried about the police as he was of Grandma. Grandpa, the qualified instructor he thought himself to be, was in his late 70s at the time and wrecked 5 different vehicles. Now, you must understand, none were ever totaled. Well, except once when he was driving his own van by himself. Then later, having no wheels, he borrowed my parents' vehicles. My mom got really upset because he didn't seem aware at all or didn't mention it when he returned it. But a couple of their cars had broken taillights. Others were sideswiped, had crushed doors, and bent fenders. When Grandma pointed it out to him, he gleefully would say, "Well, I made it anyway. I'm alive." But Grandpa always maintained his adventurous spirit. He was excited about our weekly dates and the fact that I could keep our secret for so long. I was always impressed that Grandpa came to Grandma's defense. He absolutely adored Grandma. He was always giving her praise. I'll never forget his solemn declaration and greatest compliment. He proudly stated, "Everyone that matters respects her, and anyone with any sense loves her." His eyes sparkled as he shared his love for Grandma with me. He said, "You know, sweetie, the third time around is the charm." In her closing remarks, she tearfully bid him farewell. "Grandpa, I'll always love and miss you." Another granddaughter, 17-year-old Connie Jr., brought a few smiles to the somber crowd. She related a hilarious story Grandpa shared with her several weeks before he passed, hoping she remembered the importance of it. He called her Conita, the nickname he'd given her one day while she was tending to him. "Can you do me a big favor, Conita?" "Absolutely, Grandpa. What is it?" "Just make sure when I die that you put a new pair of boxing gloves in my casket." "Why boxing gloves, Grandpa?" "I want them available so when I get to heaven, I could put them on." "You don't need boxing gloves up there." "Oh, yes, I do, because I'm going to duke it out with your late Grandpa Verlin." Why, she asked, surprised, knowing of his non-combative nature. "Honey, your Grandpa Verlin had 10 wives, and I only have one, so I will put up a fight if necessary. I'm not about to allow him to ever take Grandma back. I love her way too much." Hector's daughter, Debbie. I'm just thinking about it. Hector's daughter, Debbie, from his first marriage to Eloise, spoke beautifully and eloquently of all his talents and accomplishments. I was very happy yet surprised she had such wonderful things to say about him, especially when she'd been denied his presence while growing up. As she spoke, I got emotional seeing her siblings, Daniel and her two beautiful sisters, Sandra and Emma. I felt their pain, remembering how Hector had broken their mother's trust, leaving her with a broken heart by joining the LeBaron group and secretly marrying Judy. Hector and Judy's daughter, a lovely daughter, Mandy, who'd been Miss Preteen Utah, sat between me and Donna. She had a lovely voice and intended to sing Hector's favorite song, The Impossible Dream, but she was too emotional because she lost her mother 11 months earlier from Lou Gehrig's disease. Her baby girl was only 15 months old, and she was brokenhearted since she lost her father too. Wow. Therefore, she elected to play a CD instead. Just days before Hector's death, we discussed where he wanted to be buried. He told me that the Spencer family owned a burial plot in Dublin. His father, mother, and his beautiful sister Amanda were interred there. I asked him if his desire was to be beside his family also. "Oh no, I'm the black sheep in the family. I was an embarrassment to them because I left the Mormon church. For their sakes, I don't want to offend anybody. That's one of the reasons why I decided to be cremated." Hector, now that you've changed your mind about that, I want you to choose where your mains will be buried in their final rest. I'm flexible, so I give you permission to be in your family's plot if you truly want to. In fact, I will actually join you. No, love. I decided that both of us need to be entered into the LeBaron Cemetery. You are the first plural wife who came here 60 years ago, and your posterity is exploding. I'm sure some of them will choose a plot across the highway, too. I'm not trying to pressure you. Maybe you'll really prefer going to Galena, where Verlin is laid to rest. Wow. You see how thoughtful this man was? Wow. No way, was my quick reply. I'm absolutely certain that I want to be buried beside you. How would it look anyway if I ended up in Galena buried between both my former husbands, Verlin and Lane? And now, so that Hector and I could eventually rest in peace together, I and the crowd of mourners snaked our way in the procession to the new grave at the LeBaron Cemetery. From lack of sleep and my injured back and hips from my fall, every rut and pothole in the ungraded dirt road jarred every fiber in my being. However, I forced myself on. The plot we'd chosen was by the outer west fence of the cemetery, maybe 40 yards from the main road, which led to numerous pecan orchards. I've designated the exact spot for the sole reason that when both Hector and I lay in our tombs, we can watch my nephews and other family members on their daily drive to the orchards. They can wave to us as they whiz by and always remember the Candy Man. We could see throngs of people walking beside the casket as my sons carried it to the cemetery to its final destination. Because of the numerous cars, there was no place near for us to park. So my daughters, Connie and Barbara, let me cling tightly onto their arms, securing my hold for better footing over the rocky terrain so I wouldn't experience another bad fall. We then cautiously wove in and out among approximately 200 people who were milling around. We cut our way through the large group to the close proximity of the open grave. 12 of my grandsons steadied the pine casket as they transported it to Hector's final resting place. My daughters and I moved forward, securing our spot close by the casket for a more convenient view. My son Brent asked the numerous friends and family to please be silent while he offered a prayer. Then he dedicated Hector's final resting spot. I watched as people stretched their necks trying to peer through the crowd for one final glimpse of the closed coffin. Transfixed, we watched as the three men slipped wide black straps beneath the casket, holding them taut to lower it to its final resting place. Though I experienced sadness, I watched as my numerous grandkids and a few great-grandkids and their other younger relatives fulfilled Grandpa's wish. No fear showed on their innocent faces. I saw only the spirit of celebration. They sent him off with a standing ovation and at Brent's signal lovingly showered the grave with Skittles. I couldn't hold back my tears. I knew the finality of death. I watched as the gravel was hastily shoveled by my sons and older grandkids as they returned to the rocky soil to its original place. Everyone could hear pings as gravel and skittles covered Hector's grave. It was a memorable sight, a true celebration and tribute to the special grandpa, who we all knew as the Candy Man. I returned home later expressing a great loss, wondering what I'd do with the rest of my life. I knew one thing for sure. I did not need to catch up on the sleep I lost the last 5 nights. My body ached because I felt absolutely worn out. I hadn't fallen asleep yet. I was just relaxing, trying to block out all the stressful events of the last few days. I heard someone creeping softly into my bedroom. I stirred. It was my oldest granddaughter, Irene. Grandma, are you sleeping? Do you need some lovies? I choked up, trying not to cry any more tears, and I couldn't answer. Grandma, please be happy. You know that Grandpa is in a better place. He needed to go. Well, I'll miss him, but I promise, Grandma, you'll be with him again someday. Remember his promise to you, how he said he would put a fight for you when he got up to heaven, remember? Well, I believe he has those boxing gloves on right now, at this very moment. I think the 2 of them are in the 6th round already, and Grandpa Hector is winning. So you cheer up. I don't think a better man existed than my own sweet Hector. He testified of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. He sought oneness with God through prayer and meditation. He was a true saint in my estimation. I think what epitomizes Hector's life are the words by Victor Hugo in Les Miserables. I can't say it. What is it? Les Miserables? Y'all, Miserables. Me and the Spanish. It's going to take me out. To really love God, someone is to look into the face of God. Wait, is that Spanish? I don't even know. Unlike Verlin's death, I walked away from Hector's death with a sense of confidence and assurance of my future. I knew I would once again be reunited with Hector and that God has a wonderful plan for my life here and in heaven. The gift of peace that God has given me surpasses all understanding, and I can truly say it is well. It is well with my soul. I learned through all my experiences that one is never a failure until he or she gives up. We all fall short in some aspect of our lives, but only winners dust off their knees and continue on their journey. I stood firm on the promises of God that he would restore the years the locust had eaten. God has kept his promises. The greatest lesson I've learned is to surrender all things to God. He is in complete control. We must trust that his divine plan is unfolding perfectly in our lives. Just remember that no matter the question, the answer is love. I've been through a few harrowing experiences, but when I look back, I realized that it took every one of them to teach me and thrust me forward into the wonderful life I now experience. I have absolutely no regrets. I agree with the following wisdom written by my late husband, Hector. The things that today overwhelmingly depress you, tomorrow will be but a memory of good experiences gained. Where there was poverty, I have been abundantly blessed. Where there was abuse, I have been wonderfully healed. Where there was hunger, I have been richly filled. Where there was a desperate longing for love, I have been blessed with unconditional love. And where there were shattered dreams, they have been restored. Y'all, that is the end. Let's read the afterword. Since I'm here, I might as well. That was a long chapter. After Hector's passing less than a year ago, I have spent my time writing and visiting loved ones. My headquarters is in Northern California, where I live with my oldest daughter, Donna. I travel extensively to Alaska, North Dakota, Idaho, and Mexico to visit my children and over 200 grand and great-grandchildren. I visit often in the LeBaron colony because 7 of my children live there. All were born in Mexico and all are bilingual. I've gained satisfaction in knowing that the majority of my children have become Christians and monogamous. I've been asked why I returned to visit a group whose doctrine I no longer believe. The LeBaron colony has changed drastically in many ways throughout the last 60 years since my arrival. The biggest difference? 2 Christian churches have been planted. Polygamy is fading into the past. All my converted children and grandchildren attend Calvary Chapel LeBaron. I enjoy long visits where the people know I'm a Christian and no longer believe in polygamy or Mormonism. I spend quality time with my loved ones because I know I'm making a difference. I feel great satisfaction seeing my family steadily coming to the Lord. My sole purpose is to love and bond with them. I praise the Lord that he not only found me, but he made me a new creature. I went from being depressed and crushed down in complete despair to being a child of the Most High Living God. What a joy and relief it is that God gave me a free gift. He shed his blood for me, and he holds me in the palm of his hand. The most beautiful thing is that I gave up religion for an intimate relationship with my Lord and Savior. Believe me when I tell you his grace is sufficient. I'm so grateful that he has given us his word in the Holy Bible. I would urge you, if you don't know him, to stop working, stressing, and seeking to find your own answers. My God wants each of us to accept him and surrender, relaxing in his loving arms because he already has greater plans for us than we can ever dream of, a true prophet promised. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Jeremiah 29:11. I know because he found me, a child lost in the shuffle of 30 other siblings who experienced poverty and hopelessness. Now, by his amazing grace, I've become his child. I know because after trying to find love among a polygamous cult, I am now a child of the living God. After a life of shattered dreams, I know anyone who belongs to Christ has become a new person. The old life is gone and a new life has begun. 2 Corinthians 5:17. Being born into a cycle of brainwashing was beyond my control. Unfortunately, most of my decisions were based on fear of God. I wanted to please and a desire to honor. For a fear of God, I wanted to please and a desire to honor my family's expectations. Falling into crazy situations is easy when you're living in seclusion and deceived by your mentors. For the most part, they all have good and sincere intentions. However, I've said this before and I'll say it again. No matter how sincere a person can be, they can be sincerely wrong. Yes. My only regret is that there is no offer for mental health care, which could help deprogram abused women and children from any walk of life. My journey to escape the brainwashing took years because I was on my own. I have no regrets for any of the experiences that I have endured. I am who I am because of them. How can I ever feel love and have compassion for others unless I've walked in their shoes? I've definitely learned by my sufferings. I've learned to be still and live in the present moment, the only place where I can experience joy. It brings about heaven on earth. But most of all, I'm thrilled when people come to Christ through my speaking and writing. I want all to know that my shattered dreams were restored only through him. Irene Spencer. Y'all. Woo! So in this, she has included her book Shattered Dreams, which we've read. She has Cult Insanity, a memoir of polygamy, prophets, and blood atonement. My 2009 memoir documenting my brother-in-law who ordered 28 family members and friends killed, who challenged his authority as their spiritual leader. And they're all available, all three of her books, at irenespencerbooks.com. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm probably not going to read that third book. If I were to read it, I would have to read the beginning of it to make sure that it's not a situation where it was like this one where we hear half of the book. Because literally half of this book, which I'm irritated with now that I'm speaking to y'all about it, was stuff that we've already heard. What happened? The oldest living daughter of Irene Spencer, Donna Goldberg, assisted by her daughter, Brandy Bigelow, have tirelessly worked to release their mother and grandmother's book in this new 2019 edition. Irene Spencer passed away on March 12, 2017 at the age of 80, leaving behind an ever-growing legacy that is increased exponentially. To date, this was as of 2019, she has 129 grandchildren, 212 great-grandchildren, with several more on the way. Hector J. Spencer passed away on January 21st, 2013 at the age of 89. Irene and Hector had just celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary a month early on December 23rd. They are laid to rest beside each other in the LeBaron Cemetery in Chihuahua, Mexico. Their final wish was to be near family and friends, a place where the majority of Irene's children and their families reside. To learn more about details of her marriage to Verlin LeBaron, when she was one of his wives, you can read Shattered Dreams. You may also like her book, Cult Insanity. That's it. Y'all, this book. What do we think about this book? And of course, it has the pictures of her two other books. I'm going to be honest, as I kind of just was. I was disappointed in this book. I was really, really disappointed in this book, to the point where a couple chapters in, y'all could tell my attitude was real stank. I was hangry sometimes when I was reading it. Like, I was really disappointed. I think that Irene is a great storyteller. I think that this is a good book. But when you tell me about Shattered Dreams Restored, I don't need for a good portion of the book to talk about things that I've already read. in your Shattered Dreams book. I think that that's unfair to the readers who've already read it. And I get that, as some of you all stated, she probably did it that way because there had been time in between each of the books. I get that. I just think it was too heavily saturated with old content. With that in mind, I'm going to give this, and I think I'm being generous here, I kind of want to give it a 2.5. I really do. But I'm going to give it a 3. I'm going to give it a 3 because once she got to new stuff, it was enjoyable. So my overall rating and my generousness is a 3. You guys, let me know how you felt about this one. What's your rating? That's my first thing. Second of all, we will be reading The Sound of Gravel next because I already have that book. And now that we've heard about her husband, one of the husbands, we know that this story comes from one of those girls. So I'm interested. Until next time.